Good late Thursday or late Friday. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, giving a look at that Doppler across the region. Not really seeing any sour accent right now. That's going to be the story predominantly here on Friday, on that Saturday, for those critical outdoor events. So there could be some breezy conditions as we're getting, especially further off toward the east. There's that coastal flood advisory. We have a current risk that is pretty high there towards some of those Atlantic beaches. So just be aware of that as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. All those big outdoor events like, of course, UF Homecoming, Bradford Homecoming, FAMU Homecoming, just a lot going on as we're looking and as we're tracking things here across the area. So let me go ahead and see the wind arrows. That kind of tells the story of what we have, that coastal flood advisory in place still as we're looking as we're tracking things. It's kind of important to kind of keep that all in mind as you're looking across the area. And now there is some more active weather toward the west, and this is a sign of things to come in a way. I know there is a marginal 1 out of 5 risk as we look ahead later on tonight toward parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, western Missouri. Not that big of a risk on that Friday. Some hail possible there. You see Oklahoma City involved in this, up toward Tulsa, through Wichita, and then Kansas City. I know St. Joseph, Missouri in there as well as we're looking and as we're tracking things. And then as you look at the wind risk, it's pretty similar there overall, as well as you kind of compare and contrast them. Not much of a difference there overall with the geography. I know we're watching this, the active weather. We had that, nasty weather parts of Alaska there over, that weekend as we were looking at things, just, parts of that, state there as we were looking and tracking things. Getting into some very volatile, significant deadly conditions there. Just, you hate hearing about that. But as we go ahead and just look at things here, track things across our area. Again, just trying to give you guys the very latest, obviously, on everything that is happening here. And you can kind of see how we do have some active weather toward the northern part of the country here, and put in winter mode. They don't really see any of that wintry precip showing up, and some areas are cool enough for it as we get out toward the west. There was a tornado warning in Kit Carson County, Colorado, though, on that Thursday as we were looking at things on the Doppler perspective. And we're just going to continue to watch things as we do need that rain around here. I know not going to impact those homecoming plans, Roy, for the Gators, for the Rattlers there, for the Tornadoes of Bradford. But we're going to just have to continue to watch things in terms of that Sunday, because some areas will get some rain, even some lightning. Whenever thunder roars go indoors, we really just got to make sure we get rain and not lightning, because we have a virus that is pretty notable here in terms of that drought, that drought conditions, unfortunately. So we have to be very mindful of that. We are kind of keeping an eye on the tropics as well. Not overly concerned right now, but things can always change, so just stay on guard here as we look and as we track things. Your early Friday National Hurricane Center update here. I know, I'm just looking here on the map. We have the area to the north. That's not going to be an issue for the U.S. It doesn't seem. To the south, we got to watch, especially Puerto Rico. They're on the edge of this formation zone right now. About a 30% chance of formation here as we're looking and as we're tracking things in the next 7 days. And Puerto Rico, that's an area where it would at least be maybe a little bit quicker in terms of if they had, direct significant impacts. Because if we had in the continental U.S., not this there toward Puerto Rico itself, and that part of the U.S., it would be shorter period, because it would take a good bit longer to get toward the Gulf or South Florida or the Keys, something like that. It would take a good bit longer to timeline, but Puerto Rico would be quite a bit quicker here. So you have the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and you have Puerto Rico there in terms of areas east of Cuba in terms of the bigger land masses. As you're looking and as we're tracking things directly east there on that map. So we're gonna watch this formation, because it could become a bigger issue later down the road, but not worrying about it too much right now toward the continental U.S. Don't want to hype it up. Again, Puerto Rico, I would watch it a little closer, because this would be a little bit quicker potential for them in terms of the overall timeline, though. But Florida right now, not something to worry about. Of course, just keep your hurricane kit up to date. At this point in the season, you don't necessarily need to, based on what we're seeing right now, do anything different. Just go ahead, and you don't want to You have that hurricane kit organized. You don't want to just start, using stuff out of it and getting rid of it, because you think the threats are over. Because you just need to keep it ready, up to date here for next month and a half, just in case. As you see here, we do have that chance even in November. We had Kate, of course, 40 years ago that had Tallahassee right before Thanksgiving. Hurricane Kate is still showing the graphic. I don't have it in here tonight because we've shown it so much lately, but that, graphic, it talks about how Leon County, and up toward Thomasville, Georgia, as well, is still, in my opinion, my assessment here, the most notable hurricane or / tropical cyclone of any kind to impact these areas since the naming of the storm systems in the Atlantic Basin in 1950. So, that stuff, that's pretty bad. Can happen in November. It's the only one on that whole list, but, it kind of tells a story. I mean, we had Nicole in November as well. That wasn't too long ago. I guess that was 3 years ago now as we're coming up on that. But, we got to be careful, but not anything to really stress out about right now. That is for sure. Now, the next name on the list would be that M name there. I know, some notorious ones in the past like Michael, but that was a little bit earlier on in October. This would be closer to the Halloween time frame or in November. Melissa's that next name we had next door there that impacted Florida in 2019. That tornado in Polk County was pretty significant from that. But Melissa would be your next name here. So that's what we're watching for. Lorenzo is not around anymore in terms of that tropical name. It's been crossed off the list there. Karen, Jerry, a lot of these really not much of an impact at all. We barely had to talk about them. I mean, just, just talk about them to cross them off the list. Some of these more impactful, of course, but, nothing just really, really overwhelming here lately. Definitely toward the continental U.S. I mean, we had Chantal that hit there back, as we were looking toward July, and Barry right before. It was something where it wasn't it was a depressing when it had Mexico. Roy wasn't being tracked as a named system, but the remnants of the low combined with another area out there in Texas can cause all those fatalities there. Again, didn't have a track for it, weren't even tracking at that point. But toward July 4th morning there, toward the Texas Hill Country, it, played a role in that catastrophic, deadly flash flooding that took so many lives, all those folks, including so many, young girls there at that camp. Just absolutely awful there in Texas with the remnants, partly to blame of Barry there July 4th morning. So that name may get retired, even though it wasn't something, that was talked about. It was not picked up in the models well at all, to be quite honest. So that's something you just got to be mindful of here. Unfortunately, and again, I don't want to, talk too much about anything in the future right now because the models are going to, especially at this point for the continental U.S., if we had Melissa or whatever, one system gets a name before the other, and we end up getting Nestor to be that one that might be near Puerto Rico, give or take. It's way early to know what type of track it would take. It could go to Central America. It could come closer toward the southeast. Could recurve way east, or it could have a pattern where it gets further up, the East Coast. I mean, there's so many possibilities. We're really, I shouldn't even be mentioning all those because it's so far out it might not even develop. I mean, so, there's a lot of highs. Don't worry about it right now. Toward the continental U.S., again, Puerto Rico, I'd watch. So, I would hope Pacific risk on Saturday. You can see here toward Arkansas, we have a slight risk here. There could even be some isolated tornadoes. So, this needs to be monitored. This is something that is, something that is expected to happen. There is even a college football game in Fayetteville, Arkansas, Saturday that could have some impacts from all this. They're hoping maybe the game, be starting 3:30 there against Texas A&M. Maybe it'll be a situation where that game on ESPN will, be starting or maybe right after the storms and rain has really cleared out, at least especially that lightning, because otherwise they'll have to postpone things, delay things. But this isn't a huge threat, don't get me wrong, but this is a, legitimate threat here. Some models have trended down, maybe with a tornado threat, looking at some of the, rotational parameters here lately, but definitely some damaging winds. We haven't had this much lately. So it's worth noting things can change pretty rapidly in these environments. It's been so long that the models had to track this. I mean, just be on guard. I mean, especially on a weekend there's a, 5% SPC tornado risk, Little Rock, there in Arkansas, as well as Jonesboro, Arkansas there. Over toward Memphis, Tennessee, Jackson, Tennessee. I visited that Casey Jones Museum there earlier on this year in Jackson, there in western Tennessee back in June. I was visiting family there in Arkansas and Missouri as well. Then you also have western Kentucky there, Paducah under a 5% tornado risk, the Blue Hill, Missouri, And then you start to drop that tornado risk some, but you still have a wind risk getting up there in the ward areas there. That's more notable that because the yellow is prompted by the tornado risk for part of that zone, but for areas like St. Genevieve, Missouri, the wind risk is what's prompting this. Tornado risk is a little lower as you get a little bit further north here in this, but you're still under slight risk because 2 out of 5 risk because the damaging wind risk is notable enough to pump a little bit more elevated concern there. The slight, which I know it doesn't sound like much, but a slight risk is enough to get some watches, maybe a tornado watch, maybe some severe thunderstorm watches around that, give or take in terms of that general theory. And the hail risk, well, that's going to be more western Arkansas, southwest to south central Missouri, and eastern Oklahoma, northern Texas. So that's something that we're watching there. A slight risk for areas, just east of Dallas, really. We have the wind risk and we have a hail risk that actually kind of, originates around there as well. So we'll be watching all that here for you. But yeah, the slight risk, the biggest cities involved in that: Memphis, Tennessee; Shreveport, Louisiana; Little Rock, Arkansas; Springfield, Missouri; and Clarksville, Tennessee. And then the biggest in the marginal are Dallas, Texas; Indianapolis, Indiana; Columbus, Ohio; Fort Worth, Texas; and Nashville, Tennessee. So that's kind of the storyline with all that. Now, is the #1 team in the country, Ohio State, at home this weekend in terms of football? No, they're not. They're up in Wisconsin. So maybe it looks like a general thunderstorm risk getting up that way, but not under the severe risk where they're actually actively playing as of the formal update there. So that's kind of storyline as we're looking at, as we're tracking things. I believe it was Murray State. They moved their game up because of the inclement weather concerns for Western Kentucky. Their college football game up there as we're looking, as we're tracking. But yeah, that Texas A&M #4 team in the country based on the AP rankings playing there at Arkansas. It's a situation where we have to be very mindful that there could be some delays, disruptions there because of the weather there. That game on ESPN at 3:30. So that's the top 25 matchup where, in terms of one of the teams being #40, other than with the interim coach, Bobby Petrino for Arkansas. But it's a game where the weather could play a role. I mean, in that it could be delayed or the rain could be lingering in the early part and maybe give Arkansas, in theory, being the underdog, a little bit better chance in that one. So we shall see as we're looking out that way. So that's something that is worth noting. It could, cause that, I believe, the Texas-Kentucky game to be kind of shifted around a little. Maybe they started on a different network, something like that. That is a game in Kentucky, by the way, in Lexington. So let me check their forecast real quick in terms of the timeline, because I've been looking at that Arkansas game a lot. And I'll check even Tuscaloosa there as well for their game. Let me just look at everything. And the timing on some of that may not be as concerning because as we're looking, I mean, there could be some pop-up stuff, but as I'm kind of looking here, it's looking like they'll probably be in, fairly decent shape here unless they get a pop-up out ahead of the main complex, especially for Tuscaloosa. With that timing there, that is, let me double check everything here. With that, I mean, Tuscaloosa, that would be a, let me just check here. It is a night game, isn't it? Okay, 7:30. So that, I mean, it makes it a little bit because it's a Kentucky game too, because it is closer. Let me just, because I think there's quite a bit of interest in this because even though it doesn't impact our area directly, and we will get some of the rain from it on Sunday, lower, pretty low through the severe weather, maybe a strong storm or two, but not too concerned about that. We need the rain more than anything. Don't want lightning, but I know this could affect your day. I mean, and that, that college football watching might get disrupted because of these, if we have some delays here. So we do have the high res on some of this. So let's get out to the 18th there, Fayetteville, Arkansas. We'll take it to 3 o'clock Eastern, which is 2 o'clock Central. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this on up. We'll go ahead and kind of set this to you. And this vantage point here shows it already kind of passing Fayetteville, the worst of it. I mean, but the rain, poncho weather, or maybe a lightning strike or two that causes that cloud to get reset. Possibility behind the main line. But that severe threat would be probably dwindling down, but could cause some issues for people getting to the stadium. It's a 3:30 kickoff there, Eastern time on ESPN against, Texas A&M at Arkansas. And as we're kind of looking here, This is the 3 o'clock Eastern look. You see Fayetteville's kind of behind the worst. You see some of the worst coming through maybe around the lunch hour, give or take there. But then it's more lighter rain, poncho weather, or maybe a lightning strike or two to cause a delay. And then let's look here. This is 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central. Let's go to 7 o'clock here. You see Tuscaloosa. We have to watch out for the pop-up stuff, sure. But in Lexington, Kentucky, where Texas is playing, they're back in the top 25 after a big win. There's Louisville. They're playing Friday night at Miami, aren't they? So that's not going to be an issue for them in terms of that. But as we get out toward Lexington, you see some of these different areas in eastern Kentucky. I know there's so many areas impacted by floods going back, but there's Lexington at 7 there. And you see the GFS, you see the NAM. Pull that on because I've got a little further with high res, maybe some shower, maybe a thunderstorm, but because if that were to be delayed, then the FSU game in Palo Alto would be shifted to a different network at 10:30. See the big complex here as we're looking around Little Rock, and then the heartland there, southeast Missouri, as we're looking at, as we're tracking things. I'll back this up just a little bit here. You can see this is a 4 o'clock. Is TCU at home this week, or are they playing this week? Check them. They are playing at noon, so let's check this here. TCU. So that is North Texas. That's the Fort Worth area. As we're looking here, let me go ahead. That's 2 o'clock Eastern, and you have 3 o'clock. So that could be an issue there in Fort Worth. Oh yeah, high res is really showing that. What channel is that game on? Baylor TCU, is that on linear? Or is that just straight? It's on ESPN2, so that could impact things some then. That's not as big of a game in terms of the national picture of both already having 2 losses, but, still something big in the Big 12 race. That looks like a pretty decent chance of getting delayed there. That's an outdoor stadium in Tarrant County, so that could be an issue. How about SMU? Are they at home this week or on the road? Let me go ahead and see some of that here based on what I see. Let me pull up ACC here on my list. Okay, they're at Clemson this week. Cade Klubnik, by the way, could end up being out with an injury. That'd be a big blow for the Clemson Tigers. They need to win out to have any shot at the college football playoff. FSU, same story though. I just, with the experienced coach and quarterback at Clemson, they're the ones with the realistic shot of the college football playoff sneaking in. Very unlikely. FSU really doesn't have a chance, quite honestly, in that regard. FSU, all those losses in the ACC already as well. I mean, losing to Pitt, losing to Miami, losing to UVA, it's going to be pretty much impossible for FSU to make conference title game or the college football playoff. Clemson, probably not either, but a little bit of outside shot because their first loss was the LSU out of conference. I know, as we're looking here at the South Central and, think of that old Southwest Conference in college football, reading about that, not really seeing that in action over the years. So, but let me go ahead and see what else. So we have that game in Lexington. I'll just kind of go over that one more time. There's Louisville, but Lexington is out in here. I won't talk about Lexington that much. I mean, we had that market with some issues, that tornado weather back in the earlier part of the year with that terrible tornado East Kentucky, but kind of hazard market too, I think it was. But yes, just scattered stuff there, not too concerning in that regard. As we're looking for that Texas game, it could get a delay, sure, but honestly, looking at this, I mean, it's not a game that's as big of a deal, but that a noon ESPN2 game might be the one with the highest chance of a weather delay. Look pretty likely out there toward Tarrant County. Kind of under the radar some because it's not, a huge game, but, that game there at noon, and I'm just looking at some of the announcers here. Let me see. That was last week's list. Let me find this week's list here. So it's going to be Lowell Galindo there, Aaron Murray, and Lauren Sisler there, ESPN2 in that game. That's probably the one with the highest chance of delay there. TCU, Texas Christian there in Fort Worth. So again, that's the one where, in terms of a big game that I'm seeing on the list, I mean, there may be some that are under the radar even more so. That that are not top 25 either. Now that 3:30 ESPN game could have some issues there. You know, as we talked about, we'll be with some rain, and that's kind of the storyline there. So, you know, Alabama game could have an issue too on ABC, in theory, but it's more the pop-up stuff. I believe James Spann's going to be legendary meteorologist in Alabama, going to be the guest picker on SEC Nation, I believe it is, on Saturday. So that's interesting. There, folks wanted him on ESPN College Game Day. It didn't come to fruition, but going to be the guest picker there on SEC Nation apparently with Tim Tebow and the rest of the group there. So that's pretty exciting there for meteorology community and sports interacting there as we're looking and as we're tracking things. He's a legend in that market. Birmingham, Tuscaloosa area where he's locked people through numerous tornadoes, including, you know, that 2011 tornado outbreak there on April 27th. Obviously, that was so deadly. I was looking through some old newspapers tonight from a few months after that when I went through there, you know, and looking at some stuff there, and it was, you know, pretty, you know, just terrible thinking about how all the cleanup they had to do then, and still having to do some of that cleanup. You know, even further down the line, and so many lives lost were, you know, some lives obviously they're gone. So it's a situation there where, you know, nothing can be rebuilt for certain families. Just awful, you know, in terms of, you know, losing that loved one or multiple loved ones. Nothing like that in terms of the type of risk on Saturday here. This is a pretty low one. I mean, you got to be careful, sure. You know, could have a tornado watch, but, you know, that's a whole different type of storyline. I'm just mentioning that because of the weather, you know, in terms of meteorologist, legendary chief meteorologist in Alabama, James Spann, being on the SEC network, apparently. That's exciting to hear in terms of that. So, as we're going ahead and looky here, I know it's a situation. I know maybe some FSU grads can get on the ACC network there in terms of, you know, ACC Nation and the like, or ACC Nation, that's ACC Huddle there in terms of that on the ACC channel. So that's something we're kind of look here, and as we're tracking things, as we're monitoring things in terms of everything. Just always intriguing in regards to that. I know James Spann's role on Saturday might be more, you know, other topics too than just maybe picking games, but he could be on the SEC Nation show there around 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central, a segment at least, on that Saturday. Let's go ahead and say here the drought monitor, though. This is a concern, a big concern for local viewers here toward Tallahassee, especially Gadsden County, Jefferson, Madison County in Florida. We have an extreme drought now based on that latest Thursday update there from the folks that do this there, UNL, and not a good thing at all. Not a good thing at all. I mean, of course, the authors of this from the National Drought Mitigation Center and NOAA, you know, NWS/NCEP/CPC there. But you kind of get the idea as we're looking at and track this information. You know, Bradford County not moderate drought here at this point in time as well. A severe drought for Hamilton County there, for parts of Suwannee County and Columbia County. So we need rain. St. John's, Flagler not in it right now. Eastern Duval, that's a good thing. You know, a little bit of Nassau, but we're going to be, you know, in a situation if we don't get precip, which we're not expecting much, especially eastern areas, I mean even western areas, not too much. We're going to see this worsen probably before it gets better next Thursday's update, because Sunday's our royal, you know, only chance for notable rain, you know, as we're looking at things, and that'd be more the western areas, which do need it. The red area there needs it badly. That extreme drought there, that's not what you want to see. I mean, look at the rainfall forecast next 7 days. I think we'll get some sprinkles around Stark and the like here on Sunday and maybe Monday, Tuesday. Very small lingering chance, but, you know, we're really, you know, picking at straws here. Tallahassee may get a little bit more than what this is showing. This is probably worst case scenario in terms of rain right now for our local area. If we only get this little for Tallahassee, for Albany, which is, you know, a 10th, you know, to a 100th of an inch there, that's bad. That's going to worsen it. We may get into the highest level of drought pretty soon here and have a big problem. So we really need rain We don't want the lightning to come with the rain, though, because that can spark issues. We don't want wind when there's, lightning and not much rain either. That's problematic. See, Arkansas, get a bit of rain there in that natural state. Missouri there, you see eastern areas of the state there, inch and a half or so. Indiana getting a good bit of rain there. Let me just check real quick on some things up in that area, because I know some folks do have an interest. Indiana has a game this week on Peacock, and that is going to be at home there on the Peacock streaming platform. But their game is at 3:30 Eastern, well, in Bloomington. And I got to think about them. There, we don't, over the years, we haven't talked too much about Indiana football, but they have a chance to win that national title this year out of the almost blue. I mean, they were good last year, but what a great job Curt Cignetti doing there at Indiana. Just really, a story about perseverance. I mean, he's, in his 60s there, and now, one of the top coaches in the sport. A name most people hadn't heard of not that long ago. So how exciting for him and his family in that regard as we're looking at that. Yeah, they have to watch up in Bloomington as well. So let me go ahead and pull that up. It's not, I almost just need to have a list of all these ahead of time because there's different places, So this is Bloomington. This is 4 o'clock Eastern time there as we're looking at things in Bloomington. And you see 5 o'clock. Yeah, they could have a problem. It's on streaming, so you can accommodate a couple games there. It's not like a certain channel in general with that. But IU's football game against that opponent there, Michigan State, could have some problems with delays as well. So yeah, we gotta just watch for that there, because that is your simulated radar at 6 o'clock Eastern time. The game wouldn't be over by then. Maybe for Indiana fans, hopefully they're well and in control with it, but probably with it being a conference game especially, they'd have to finish that. So that's the storyline there as we're looking at it, as we're tracking things. That team, that's the only team FSU beat last year in the ACC, and the only ACC win FSU has had in a while with that quarterback. Not, the actual team Indiana, but the quarterback for Indiana. He was at Cal, Fernando Mendoza. It's crazy. I think we had him, FSU did to 7 points last year. And, now he's just, in the Heisman race there. What a great job he's done. Did good in some of the games, but it's the only FSU ACC win we've had against that quarterback of all of them since the college football playoffs now in 2023. So, yeah, it's been tough for the FSU football team there. FSU men's basketball, they showed some real promise in Birmingham Thursday night there against the Alabama Crimson Tide. Came up a little short, but it's preseason. And both teams scored over 100 points. I mean, what a great job there by Luke Louch, taking over from the legendary coach Leonard Hamilton there, who should have had that chance in 2020, but COVID shut things down. He could have went to the Final Four as the head coach, could have won that national title. He had one as an assistant at Kentucky, that elusive national title as head coach. That probably, is going to be his best shot at it for sure. At least to get his Final Four. I mean, it seemed like, pretty strong chance of that. And, the national title was definitely within reach, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen for him, with COVID-19 obviously being such a terrible, terrible thing, predominant story, in the ensuing years. As we go ahead and, again, we're looking at Bloomington because of that weather. Let's check Wisconsin because that's Michigan there. Let's check Wisconsin. I need to turn the current reader off. In Madison, 3:30. They should be good based on what I'm seeing. It's CBS with Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson, that group there. Gary's last year, and he'll be calling that game in Madison, the Big Ten on CBS. What a great group. SEC CBS has had there with Vern Lundquist there and Todd Blackledge, and it was Vern and Gary. Then, it was Brad and Gary, and next year it'll be Brad and Charles Davis on that. But, congratulations this year, Gary Danielson, a legend. A lot of folks sometimes criticize the announcing, but he really done a great job in my assessment over the years. One of the best to ever do, the profession of sports broadcasting. Gary Danielson, congratulations on his ensuing retirement, but they'll be up there in Madison, and the weather looks okay in terms of the conditions, simulated radar up that way. So that's kind of the storyline up in that area. Notre Dame, 7:30 NBC and Peacock. Let me go ahead and, This is what's tricky because some of the games it's easy to forget about them, quite honestly, because focused on FSU and some of the top in matchups. Some of the when I look at a certain list, it won't so the storm chances is high, but it actually is that hidden chance in here. Yeah, South Bend could have some problems. That's an NBC primetime game. And on the actual linear network there at Notre Dame Stadium, they could end up having some weather issues there on Saturday night. Could have some problems with the inclement conditions. If it's just rain, okay, but if there's some lightning in there, that could be a problem. And there is that general thunderstorm threat as we're tracking things here. They're not really quite in the form of severe. They're very close to it, right on the edge, but I think they're just out of it. I'm just looking at my maps here. Let me check the county real quick. I know we had some really nasty storms in baseball season that were coming in up there. Yeah, they're right on the Michigan line, so it's a situation where maybe not in the form of severe risk, but they could end up having some problems up there as we're tracking things there. Yeah, that's something we'll have to be watching out for sure for those folks. And so, the best chance, it almost looks surefire to have a delay at TCU. You never see that in terms of sports and weather forecasting because the time, an hour or two different, and you don't have the problem. But just in terms of that, the TCU game looked pretty obvious. The Arkansas game's kind of the one where a lot of folks have been watching because they are under pretty big risk, but the time might not set up in the worst way in terms of the severe and the lightning, but we'll see. Then you have the Indiana games, and one on Peacock, one on NBC and Peacock. You have Bloomington. We backed this up a little bit, and there may be a squall coming through to delay that one. And then under the radar, I haven't honestly seen any talk about either one of these having delays. Maybe I'm not looking at the right spot on social media. I've seen a whole bunch of talk about that Arkansas game. But as I look at it on, live here with you, the modeling says South Bend, Notre Dame game may get a lightning delay. The Indiana game against that team there coming on in, Michigan State, they could end up getting a delay as well because of the timing, even if they're not under the bigger risk like Fayetteville is earlier on in the timeline. So it's kind of tricky with that, if you're not really, you have to really look at that closely. Looking out west here, I know, just checking here my thunderstorm risk and a big Utah rivalry game. No lightning expected out there for that. How about rain? Not really seeing that. So that's the storyline with all that. We're just continuing to give you the latest. And there's a special rain warning in the country. It's out toward areas south of Puerto Rico right now. And then we also have, we're been watching Alaska, the aftermath of all that, that tragic weather that, a little bit more in terms of not, the most populated areas, but definitely some tragic weather out there. Remnants of a typhoon. Once we go ahead and get back on over, though, toward the graphics, and that big homecoming parade coming up here, toward, Gainesville and the like, but up in Georgia here, you can see southwest Georgia, there is that extreme drought. As we're looking and as we're tracking things here, you can see where Bainbridge there and Cairo, and like I know they just, been having their big yearly event in Moultrie, that agriculture get together and the like that draws so many people there. And this is not what the folks in agriculture want to see with all this drought. I know they were so impacted by Hurricane Michael 7 years ago. Well, this isn't to that level of, concern, but this can be, obviously an issue when you're in agriculture and don't have that precept. So we're going to get some on Sunday, but maybe not enough here as we're looking and as we're tracking things. As we go ahead and see the extended forecast, though, as we continue to watch things, as we continue to track here, you do see Friday pretty low, almost 0 rain chance. Same on Saturday, 84 for the high both days, give or take. Could have some wind that could impact some of those floats in theory towards Stark and Gainesville. Bradford Homecoming Parade, I believe, is at 1. And the Gainesville one, UF's at 12. And there could be some wind impacting that. Saturday, those, big football games, FAMU and Gainesville as well against Mississippi State. That rain chance there, not too much of a factor. Bradford game Friday night, it might start getting a little cool later on, but not terrible. That's pretty nice weather, really. And on Sunday, the storm chance is higher west. In Tallahassee, you have a higher than 50% chance of rain and storms. Historic, pretty almost, minuscule chance of storm, not zero of lightning, but the rain chance is under 50 in Stark, but it's still possible. We need some rain, even if it's just a little bit. It's better than nothing, as long as we don't get lightning or too much wind with things. As we get north Monday there, Tuesday, you see the temperatures here a little above average. You can see the contrast highs a little higher than average, lows, some of them a little lower, and that indicates drier air still around in general. 55 Tuesday, 54 Thursday morning. Some areas, rural could get lower 50s even with this. So that's kind of the storyline with all that. Again, enjoy things with those homecoming parades, those homecoming games. Make sure you're extra careful with traffic and pedestrian traffic and just being careful all the way around. It's so important here, to stay safe and enjoy that homecoming weekend. Folks are heading back from some of those festivities, Sunday, that's when the storms will be coming in. We'll have to be watching for some of that here as we're tracking things. We're just going to keep you guys up to date here as we're monitoring the overall scenario here. I'm trying to get some modeling up here real quick that kind of shows this a little bit, so just bear with me. I'm going to set the GFS model real quick of some of the storm accidents that could come in, impact some folks on the interstates and the like. Switch sources again. That's when we're looking at 7-day. North Florida, South Georgia. Of course, we're in Stark here. Bradford County is where I'm at. One of the 62 counties that we cover here as we look and track things. I know in our more rural area right now, east of Stark. If you're watching live, we're at 58. Beaches quite a bit warmer. Some of these spots here as we're looking here across our region. Again, what type of current rest toward East Coast beaches? Gotta be mindful of that. Now here's that forecast model. So this is the American model, 11 a.m. on that Sunday here. As we're tracking things. Now you might be watching that Jacksonville, the Jaguars game in London against the Rams, the LA Rams, and hoping for a Jags win over there. But you'll be watching maybe the radar too in Southwest Florida, some rain. You see some more heavier downpours in the Florida Panhandle. And then you see by 2 o'clock, though, getting into our area, we see that a decrease in the reds. You see some yellows, but nothing overwhelming. I'd be really surprised if we get a local warning. Maybe we get one out toward Panama City or something, a rogue severe thunderstorm warning or something. But by the time it gets into our 62 counties, I'd be, again, surprised to see a warning popping up. Maybe, some lightning, maybe a stronger storm. We get an advisory or two in some of these areas around too. But that's probably about the extent of that. And then we see the rain really fall off. We barely see any precip around Stark here on this. Maybe, just some sprinkles. I mean, this is a accumulated precip there, and I back this up a little bit. This is going to be from, as I do the math on my time here, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. It shows here in this forecast model about 4 tips of evidence for Tipton to Adel. They'll take everything they can get if they don't get, lightning, too much wind. Bainbridge, about 3/10 of an inch on this. Seminole County over ½ inch maybe, and then toward a little bit of Decatur, and then Gadsden County a little over ½ inch in a few spots, but a lot of areas like Tallahassee maybe only about 1/10 of an inch. As we kind of watch this progress, and you see how things are just breaking up here. As we get into toward that Monday, you don't see much, maybe a little bit of reformation there around sunrise. Gainesville a precip, and then maybe a little bit more on that Tuesday morning, as we had, some lingering chances of rain in there on that 7-day, but nothing too overwhelming in terms of all that. So that's kind of the storyline there as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here. Just trying to keep you guys updated on everything as we're giving you the very latest information. It's 3:03 in the morning if you're watching live. If you're watching on demand, you can watch on demand, just in the future on these platforms, or watch live. Facebook, Casey Cloud Reacts, Cloud Weather, Twitter, /Cloud Casey, YouTube at Cloud Weather, Twitch Cloud Weather, cloudweather.com, has all the different links, including the interactive radar available. I know FSU going out there towards Stanford to take on the Stanford Cardinals Saturday night. And in terms of things out there, Just a real quick look at that forecast for Palo Alto Saturday night off camera. It's going to be pretty clear in that direction. And yeah, it'd be 7:30 Eastern, 10:30, or excuse me, 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern out there, and it's be starting to get a little bit cooler maybe in toward that area. So that's something that I'll be watching for as we're looking out that way. But maybe 60s, eventually, as we're looking with some of that there in the timeline. We'll be kind of monitoring that in that regard, obviously, as we're looking at things. So that's kind of the storyline there. I'm just gonna check something else real quick here. I wanted to. They're not riding the optimal area in general. Well, I haven't really looked this up about any fog threat. Let me just see if there's any type of fog threat out there. I don't know if we can quite get the high reds far enough out to check that. Game starting so late, 10:30 Eastern in the ESPN, 7:30 Pacific there. But yeah, we'll watch for that. Sometimes I can get in some of those areas in California, not necessarily see it right off in the model, but it didn't really go out quite far enough for me to be able to double check some things here with this as we look and as we track. So don't really see it right off though in terms of any of the overall, parameters here. So that's good. As we go ahead and wrap it on up, I hope you guys have a great night. Hope you guys have a great weekend here. Stay safe. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking things. And we'll be back here as conditions warrant. If we have anything too crazy in the Midwest, we'll, be at least retweeting it at Cloud Casey on Twitter. If there's something really, out there, we'll break in. I don't anticipate having to at this point for anything locally or nationally, but we'll be watching as we always are. We've been on for Tornado Warning Storm the last 6 years or so, and we'll make sure if we have anything that pops up here on us, really crazy, we'll be letting you guys know about it. But otherwise, have a great night, have a great weekend, stay safe, go Noles out there on that west coast out there in California as they take on Stanford. And go Bradford as well for that homecoming, that parade today, taking on, of course, tonight, that team there from Tallahassee Leon, the Lions, I believe it is, coming on into town. Just wishing everybody, just a happy homecoming.